Welcome to Conversations with Big Rich. This is an interview-style podcast. These interviewed are all involved in the off-road industry. Being involved, like all of my guests are, is a lifestyle, not just a job. I talk to past, present, and future legends, as well as business owners, employees, media, and land use warriors. Men and women who have found their way into this exciting and addictive lifestyle we call off-road. We discuss their personal history, struggles, successes, and reboots. We dive into what drives them to stay active in off-road. We all hope to shed some light on how to find a path into this world that we live and love and call off-road. This episode of Conversations with Big Rich is brought to you by the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame. The mission of the Hall of Fame is to educate and inspire present and future generations of the off-road community by celebrating the achievements of those who came before. We invite you to help fulfill the mission of the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame. Join, partner, or donate today. Legends live at ormhoff.org. On today's episode of Conversations with Big Rich, we have Judy Smith, the 2008 Ormhoff inductee for journalism. Judy has spent many years covering Baja racing, and not from just the normal who won, but more importantly, I think, is who didn't. We'll get into all of that and talk to Judy about her days at Dusty Times and other publications, and also her time racing cars. Hello, Judy. How are you doing today?
And you are?
My name is Rich Klein.
Hi.
I do a podcast about the history of off-road by those that live the lifestyle.
Really? When?
I started this just about 3 years ago.
Oh, really?
Ormhoff, Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame, has asked me to do all of the inductees.
Oh, wow. Who have you done?
I have done a couple of the new rock crawlers, Lance Clifford from Pirate 4x4 and Brad Lovell. He races short course desert, one of the BFG Ford racers.
Right.
And he rock crawled as well. I've done Frank D'Angelo.
Oh, really?
I did Bob Bauer, which ended up being two episodes.
Good.
And then I just did Marty Fiocca.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Okay.
And I did a Dean Bullock.
So then where do all these things show up? You do your own interview and you provide it, you send it out yourself, right?
Correct. It goes out through all of the podcast hosting platforms.
Oh.
So there's like Apple has their own. There's one with Spotify and YouTube. And then we have our own website called Big Rich Klein. The interview is called Conversations with Big Rich.
Huh. I'd like to be able to get to it somehow and hear what it sounds like.
Oh, absolutely. I can send the link through email.
We may have to do some horsing around to figure that out because I haven't played around with that since I've been here. So I'll get Jennifer here to help and we'll get it figured out.
Yeah, I'll email the links to Jennifer, and then she can figure that out for you and get you to listen.
Okay. So what is it what's most on your mind?
I would like to know about your life and history. So I have some questions for you, and if you'd like, we can get started on that.
Okay.
All right. You were born in Connecticut and
Right.
then moved to Southern California, and you were still in high school. Was that a move for your parents chasing work, or what facilitated that?
Chasing work. My stepfather worked for Howard Hughes.
Oh, for Howard Hughes.
Yeah. No, it is.
What was he doing for Howard?
Well, they were building, I don't know what they were building, some kind of critter thing that flew or did something.
Oh, okay.
All right. Down out by the beach.
Oh, okay.
Out at the original business.
All righty. And that was while you were in high school. Were you already did you already have a year in high school in Connecticut and then moved
I was right, yeah, I came out here in the 11th grade.
11th grade? And what was that
Uh-huh.
like transitioning from the East Coast to the West Coast when you're,
Oh,
in a very important time of your life?
it was scary. It,
Right.
it 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 wasn't just that the places were so different. I mean, Connecticut to Southern California, a completely different part of the world,
Right.
But the people were different, clothes were different, kids wore different kinds of clothes to school. Oh, it took some doing to get reorganized.
And did
Yeah.
you feel that you were successful
Oh,
in
I was successful. I graduated from high school, in the higher elevations. I was
okay.
I was a good student, and I didn't have any trouble, you know, doing that. It was just a little bit hard to understand what people were doing.
Socially?
Yeah, right.
Okay.
But not. I mean, we didn't. I didn't go to the beach all the time in Connecticut, and here you could. We lived so close that I could just walk down to the beach. We had all kinds of differences like that made things very different. And we didn't. Anyway, there are all kinds of differences in the way teenagers do things.
Right.
Maybe not now, because I think television makes everybody kind of work together now. But back then, California teenagers were very different from Connecticut teenagers.
I would imagine. And cracking that social barrier between East and West could have been fairly difficult.
It was a little bit, yeah. But I was a good student, so I didn't have that to worry about.
Right.
I just sort of had to go along with the flow, and it all worked out.
And when you were in high school, what were your aspirations to do afterwards?
Go to college.
Okay. Did you have a specific major that you were looking at?
No,
No? Okay. So no
college.
idea of what you wanted to do for a career.
No,
Okay.
not really. I always knew I was going to go to college.
Excellent. Excellent. And when you went to college, what were your courses of study?
Art history.
Oh, art history. Okay. Excellent. And same thing that I did. My college years were spent in art, but mostly photography art.
Oh yeah, they didn't have photography at UCLA when I was going there. I wanted to get into it because we had a friend who was a commercial photographer back in Connecticut, and I kind of liked what he did, but I couldn't figure out a way to learn how to do it out here. I probably might have been able to, but I couldn't drive. I hadn't learned to drive, and so I didn't have the freedom that I would have had if I had figured out how to get from one place to another.
And you said that you grew up near the beach. What community was that?
Playa del Rey.
Okay. And what kind of activities did you do as a youth, high school, college, besides school? Did you, hanging out at the beach, did you try surfing?
Yeah, but I did. It scared the hell out of me. I didn't do well with surfing at all. I thought I was going to drown, and
Okay.
I pretty much gave that one up.
All
I
right.
wasn't a good swimmer, and the waves picked me up and threw me down, and I said, no, I don't need to do this.
Okay. So you knew your limitations.
Yeah, as
Okay.
far as the ocean was concerned, yeah. I learned to drive out here, and I like driving, and I drove up in the hills. That's where I learned to drive. Some friends took me up there, and so that had something to do with some things that came later on.
Right. And when you say up in the hills, was that on paved roads or were you
But yeah,
driving
on
dirt
paved
roads?
roads, the
Okay.
hills, but there were some dirt roads also.
All right.
Yeah, they took me in a Volkswagen.
Oh, very good. Very
It was
good.
when Volkswagens were newly brought into the States. We hadn't had them here very long, and we were all learning how to drive them.
Excellent. And so has that always been kind of a favorite car of yours, the old Volkswagens?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, me too. My first car was a 54 Volkswagen.
Yeah, so mine was something like that, yeah.
That's awesome. So then after college, you're studying art history, you graduate. What was the next step?
Well, by the time I got into college, I'd been around for a while, and I was already married. So I was being a housewife
Okay.
for quite a while.
And then at what point did that turn into
An off-road racer?
yeah.
You remember there was a lady that swam the English Channel? Remember that? Way back when.
Right.
Okay. So I read about this lady who did that, and I thought, boy, that's neat. That's good that women are beginning to do things like that. And I wondered what I could do. So I got to horsing around and reading things and looking at things and trying to figure out. And we sort of lived near the desert, and I did kind of like to drive in the desert, but I hadn't learned to do much. But I knew some people who did do it because my first husband used to race bikes. And so I met people like Bud Eakins. You know who he is?
Yes.
Okay. So Bud was somebody that I knew and knew fairly well. And I asked him if he thought it would be okay for a female to go racing. He said, sure, why not? And he took me out and showed me how to drive.
Excellent. And that was a vehicle, a four-wheel vehicle?
And a Volkswagen.
A
A Volkswagen sedan.
Okay. And then from Bud showing you how to drive a Volkswagen in a desert type situation, I would imagine driving faster too than what you would normally do.
We went down to El Mirage Dry Lake.
Okay. And do you remember how fast you were able to get that Volkswagen going?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I didn't look at the speedometer. I was looking at the road.
That's smart. Very good. And without GPS, it wasn't easy for your co-pilot to be paying attention to speed either.
No, right.
So then,
waving hands around and all that sort of thing.
Right. And when did you first get a chance to go beyond just driving in the desert?
Well, I had been watching the motorcycles race. My first husband kind of raced the bikes, but we had been going to the motorcycle races, and he belonged to the same organization that Bud Eakins belonged to. So I had met Bud and all kinds of racers. I knew a lot of them. So when I heard about something, I don't remember which one it was right now, but I called Bud and asked him if he thought I could drive it and would enjoy it and all that. And he said, sure, why not? So I did.
And that was back in
I don't remember the year. I don't even remember which race it was. Probably something out there in the desert by El Mirage.
Okay.
But I'm not real sure.
And how long after you went out and did that did you get into being a journalist? Was there quite a span there? More racing done?
Yeah, there was more racing done, and I told somebody that I could write the stories. I think it might have been Hoppy W's magazine.
Okay.
And then Gene Calvin came out and made the Dusty Times publication. And then I wanted to do the losers column. So I did that for her as well as writing all the racing stories. And then I wrote various things for other people off and on. Okay.
About Dusty Times, is that where you started writing the losers column, or was that with?
That was Jean was a racer too,
right?
And so she understood what I was talking about when I told her. Said, the losers are the best part of the stories, but normally you don't talk about them in a regular story because there just isn't enough time to do all that. And so I said, I think we ought to have a column on the losers. And she thought it was wonderful. So I didn't have to convince her. She just knew right away that it would be great. As long as I was willing to write it, she was happy to print it.
Most definitely. That's excellent. What attracted you to, besides, I guess I'm answering my own question by asking the question, but besides the story that, that the loser has, focusing on, not the winner, I should say, because even a second place or a non-podium, top the fourth or fifth place would probably have some good stories on why they weren't number one.
In off-road racing, they do. Jean had this off-road magazine publication that she put out every month. And so I told her I could write stories for it. I did something for Hot VWs. And I don't remember how I started that. They called me and asked me if I could write a story. And I can't remember exactly what it was. I think I went up to Alaska and got involved in something anyway, and they wanted a story on it. And it seemed kind of fun to be writing the story. And then Jean started her magazine, and she decided I could write. So she asked me to write the stories about, she didn't want to do them. She just wanted to publish the magazine.
Right. Oh, I understand that one, having a magazine myself.
Yeah.
So with asking all those questions of those drivers that may not have finished a race or didn't finish on top, do you remember, is there any one story that just really stood out?
No, I don't really think there is. I thought some of them, I can remember Jim Johnson, that he had to spend the night out down there, and he was scared to death of it, and things like that. But I really don't. I would have to give it some serious thought, because I haven't given it any attention for a while.
Okay.
Every now and then something happens. I hear somebody talk about something, and I remember one racer who said, I never want to do that again. I don't want to spend the night by myself all alone in the desert. A male racer,
Right.
It was so not pleasant. It helped you to learn about people, talking to all these people, because I wasn't just talking to people that did well, because I wrote the losers column. I was writing to people that had awful things happen, So I thought that was way more interesting than the ones who just got in and started and then finished first. That wasn't near as interesting as the ones that had all these troubles, and they spent the night sleeping here and there, and they had to put things back together, and they drove so many miles with only 3 wheels, I thought those were much more interesting stories.
Oh, I'd agree with that. And how about yourself when you were racing? What were some of did you ever have one of those races where you spent the night out there?
Yes, I did.
Was that Mexico? Did it happen in Baja?
Yes, it did.
Did you see a lot of eyes that night? Where you think
only one time.
Only once?
And that one time was one that was so close to the end that I knew there were a lot of eyes, because we were so close to a town that the people from the town come out to watch the race. And I thought that was a little bit scary, and I probably shouldn't say that. But basically, yeah, I did. I was always happy if there was another racer broken in the same place.
I can understand that. Well,
Yeah.
I did a race where we were down in San Felipe area, and it was getting late at night, and we were waiting for cars to come through. And cars would come through and couldn't find their pits, even though we were in an
Yeah.
area with 50 or 60 other pits. And
Yeah.
so we radioed our team and said, okay, we're going to light a big bush on fire so that you know where we're at.
I've seen them do that in San Felipe.
Yep, and we lit this big bush on fire, and the bush came alive because all the snakes and scorpions and tarantulas and everything else that lived in that bush decided it was getting too warm for them. And then we had all the teams show up wanting gas from us because they couldn't find their own pits.
They couldn't find their own. And they said, well, there's one with it that's got a fire. Maybe it's ours. Yeah.
Exactly, yes.
When did that happen?
Oh, it was probably 2009 or 10.
Yeah, I might have been there for that one.
It was, we were working with Pistol Pete Soren. And
really? Yeah, I probably was there.
he broke out, and we were waiting on the a full stock, a Ford Raptor. So it was the first year the Ford Raptors had run. So it must have been 2009 or 10.
Yeah, maybe I was there. I can't remember when the last time was I went, but yeah, I can remember that kind of stuff happening, yes. All kinds of weird things like that.
Right. And what was your most favorite class to talk about or report about?
To report about Baja races.
The Baja races. And any particular car class?
Class 1.
Class 1, okay.
Yeah, but I enjoyed Class 5, and I enjoyed the Volkswagens, the little ones at the back. I waited around for them to get to the finish.
That's awesome, because they were always the last ones to leave the line.
That's right. Yep. But they had such good stories, you know. They all kinds of wonderful things happened to them, and so I wanted to get their stories to put them in the magazine. I sometimes a new class would start up, or somebody who hadn't raced before, or somebody who used to race one class would switch to another. Then I wanted to catch those too, you know. And we had a couple of racers. Once in a while you get some racer who didn't usually race off-road. It was always kind of fun to get them at the finish and see what they thought about it. I tried to talk to everybody, but if there was somebody who was a little different, you know, you got somebody's brother or somebody's father or something like that racing, I wanted to be sure and get them too. I'm just kind of interested in people. So
right.
It was easy to do.
Okay. And what's the biggest attraction to you personally about desert racing?
I think it was, for me, it was the feeling of being out there on my own. And nobody was there to say, you didn't do that right. You should have put it in a different gear. You didn't turn the car at the right place. I was by myself. If I screwed up, I screwed up. But if I did it right, I did it right.
So it was overcoming, you know, the doing it on your own, overcoming by yourself.
If you were pardon me, a female growing up when I grew up, you would understand more about that, because when you got into a car, you got 8 or 7 males around telling you all the things you were doing wrong. And that went on. It didn't matter what male was in the car with me, just a regular, you know, something. There was always somebody that wanted to tell you you were doing it wrong. Why did you change gears? Why did you do this? Why did you do that? So it was so nice to be in a single-seat car, and nobody would know if I did miss a shift. Nobody would know if I did the wrong thing, and I could learn to do the right thing and have a good time.
Good. Excellent. I can imagine, especially back then, that men were, well, yeah, I understand
Trouble.
exactly what you're
It
saying.
was one of the reasons that I started, because I was, women were beginning to do things, um, like the lady that swam the English Channel and all of that. And I thought we need more women out there showing people that women can do these things. And so it was part of the reason that I got into the off-road. And I can't remember exactly why, except that we lived out near the desert, and I had a little car that I could ride around in the desert, and I thought maybe that would do. And I knew that I knew Bud Eakins. And so I knew I could get information from him about how to do it, where to do it, who to go with, and all that sort of thing. So I figured it was a good way to start.
Was he a pretty good mentor?
Oh, wonderful. You know who he was?
I know of him, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
No, I knew him when he was racing just bikes.
Right.
I had met him back then when he was just racing just the bikes. But then he moved up and got down into Baja, where he was doing the whole thing. He ran the 1,000 and drove it all by himself and won. And I can't remember what year that was.
Do you consider yourself first a driver or a journalist?
A driver?
Driver first. Excellent.
Yeah.
And then tell the story of the drive afterwards.
Yeah.
Nice. And did you ever write about your own story in the
Sure.
car? Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. I haven't had a chance to go through a lot of the Dusty Times. I know that when I had Vora, I talked to Gene. I may have even talked to you on the phone about some of our races. I don't remember.
Could be.
I remember talking to a lady, and I don't remember if it was you or Gene, about what was happening with Vora, and that was probably 2003 or 4. So.
Yeah, it'd probably be me. Jean her husband was sick, and stuff was getting difficult for her, and so I was doing most of the interviewing, most of that kind of stuff.
Okay. In your first attempt at Baja, you were in a Volkswagen Bug, what I would think was probably class 11, and you had another. Was that was your first race, or was that your first race in Mexico?
First race in Mexico. I drove one race that started at El Mirage Dry Lake, a quick little race. And I didn't do very well or anything, but I wanted to see if I really enjoyed doing it. And Bud said it would be a good way to figure out if I really wanted to do it. And I decided that that was fun. It started at El Mirage and went up into the mountains and then came down again. It was a lot of fun. I didn't do well, but I had fun. I enjoyed it, and that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something that not too many women had done, because I thought more women needed to do more things like that, anything like that. And I decided, that was a good one.
And did you get a lot of support from the men around, besides telling you that you were doing things wrong?
Most of the men were helpful. Some were really terrible. Some were just awful. I remember one telling me that if I ever beat him, he would do this or that or something,
Was that your goal then, to beat him? It would have been mine.
Yeah, it was mine.
Excellent.
To beat as many men as I could, yes.
Yes, that's the whole idea.
Yeah, I just wanted to show people that women could do the same things that men could do and do as well.
And driving a car is one of those.
Yep. Yeah, and when I learned to drive, I knew some of these guys, they were bikers then. They had not gotten into off-road. So they took me up into the Hollywood Hills, and we drove around up there, and that's how I learned to drive a Volkswagen. And so I already knew how to drive a 5-speed and all of that stuff, and I knew how to drive in the hills. So I sort of had a little bit of an edge, because I didn't just learn to drive on a plain old street. But they had said I was okay. I did all right. I drove just fine. So I thought, well, then why can't I go and race with him?
Right. And that was well accepted in your family?
Yes, with a lot of people, but there were. I can remember one guy telling me if I ever beat him, he wouldn't come back and race again. I don't know whatever happened to him.
Because he didn't come back and race again.
He maybe didn't. Yeah, there were guys that were awful about it. Really terrible.
And I hate to say this, but I think there's still guys like that out here doing that.
Oh, I think so.
And it's a shame.
It is a shame. Yeah.
We had
and I wish there were more women that could do it, but you still have this problem. They grow up with this thing that says that men are in charge of all that kind of stuff, and men are in charge of the finances. And what man is going to give a woman all the money to go do that if it means she's going to go out and beat him at something, Right. Yeah. It's too bad.
It is too bad.
But there were a few women, and we had a good time.
Was there a lot of competition between the women?
No.
Or was it more of a sisterhood?
I don't think it was either, particularly. Okay. I think we were all individually set on doing as well as we could do. I think we were all anxious to beat the men, but there really weren't very many of us, maybe 7 or 8 or something,
Okay.
Once in a while I wrote a little story where I tried to catch the ones, but some of them were just doing it as a one-time thing that they were never going to do again because their boyfriend or husband or somebody said, you want to try to race it, I don't understand it. I couldn't figure out why more didn't.
Well, you were a groundbreaker because there's a lot more women competing nowadays than ever before.
Good. There should be. There's no reason that they shouldn't be. They can learn to drive as well as any guy. The only thing they can't do is lift it up and move it over something. If something has to be lifted up, that gets a little difficult. If you're a 105-pound woman instead of a 170-pound man.
Right. And what that first race that you did in Baja, was that the 500 that you finished?
I think it was 1,000.
1,000, okay.
Yeah.
And that was in a Baja Bug?
Yeah, I drove a two-seater with a female riding with me, but we spent the night sleeping in the desert, so we didn't finish that one. But then I think the first one that I got to the finish was 1,000. Yeah, all by myself.
That's great. That's pretty cool to do.
It was cool. One of the things that was really neat about it, but I didn't find out until later, is there was a team of Mexican men who knew that I was racing. And where the hell they found that out, I don't know. And they all lived down around La Paz. And this was my third race or something like that. Anyway, they thought it was wonderful that a woman was racing, and they were out to cheer me on. And when I got down to roughly where they were, which was not very far above the finish, I had a flat tire. Those sons of bitches came out of the desert and came out, fixed my tire, and put the car together and told me to get on the way. A whole family full of Mexican guys, because they were so glad to see a woman coming down and doing it. It was so much fun.
That's awesome. That's a great story.
It was a great story, yeah.
Did you ever get a chance to meet them later?
I finished third, and I saw some of them later. They were around.
Good.
And I thought it was neat because I finished third in the class, which I thought was class 1 was pretty neat, even with the Mexicans fixing the tire. It was fun.
That's great.
I always carried a $20 bill in case I had to stop and get somebody to fix something on my car. I had it with me, and I could not get those guys they fixed the car. I couldn't get them to take the $20 bill, but they had a teenager there, and he wasn't paying attention, and I stuffed it into a pocket.
That's awesome. That's all right. You paid your Baja toll. That's good.
Well, you spend that much money to get into a race, somebody comes out and spends a long time. And what I didn't realize until years later, when I met one of them, they had been at some other point along the road, and somebody had radioed that they saw me and I had a flat tire. And so they left where they were and came down to where they could intercept where I was. So I thought they were just there arbitrarily, but they came on purpose because they knew it was me and they wanted to help me. And I always get this feeling when I'm in Mexico that the Mexicans had a different opinion of women than men as far as doing things. But let me tell you, those guys were definitely there to see me do well, and they were there to help me. And they told me later on that was why they were there. I never could understand that. I thought it was wonderful.
Absolutely. That's great. Especially for them to pack up where they're at and to try to intercept you to help you with your tire. Yes.
Right. So they knew they could get to where I was. Yeah. Yeah. It was really, and met some of them years later. They were still around. They all lived down at the bottom. So I would meet them. This racing in Baja is, I haven't done it in any other places, just up here and down there. But it's got to be nicer and friendlier than any place else because the spectators are wonderful.
I would agree with that completely. That's the allure to me of racing in Baja is the people.
Yeah, they are. The people are just tremendous. Yeah, well, they told me that they said, up in the United States, baseball is the big thing. Everybody loves baseball. They said in Baja, it's off-road racing. They said, we don't care about baseball. It's off-road racing is our sport down here.
That's excellent. And what kind of advice would you give somebody that was looking to get involved in off-road racing or desert racing?
Get a lot of money. It doesn't look like a lot of money, but it does take a lot of money. A lot to make the vehicle and a lot to go to all the places where the races are. You don't just go to the racetrack. You're traveling off to different parts of the states, I guess, and down there too. So you have to go and pre-run and then come back and then go back down again. And there's a lot of horsing around.
Right.
But I just think just get in a car and go drive around a lot and see if you really like doing that. See if you like being out in the middle of some place you've never been before all by yourself.
Yeah, you need to be able to experience that beforehand because it's going to get you there.
Right. Some people can't find their way, like my husband never knew which was left, right, in or out or anything. He just couldn't. But I always know where east, west, north, and south are. So I couldn't really get lost in Baja. I could maybe miss a trail, but I still knew if I was going in the right direction and all of that. But some people could be, I met some guys from Ford that were so lost they couldn't believe, they had no idea where they were, standing around in the middle of the course going, duh, because they were on the course, and the course was south, and they didn't know which was south. How could you be that dumb and be on a place like a peninsula and not know where south is?
That's because they were men and had helmets on.
They were from Ford. But how did they build our cars, for crying out loud? I couldn't believe it. They were nice, honest, pleasant gentlemen who, if you met them at a bar or someplace like that, you'd say they're nice guys. But they were so lost, I couldn't believe it. And they thought it was amazing that a female, we were pre-running, they thought it was just absolutely amazing that a female was down there by herself and knew where she was going. So will you just go down there? Well, how do we know? I said, south down there. You're going south. They were terrible. They were awful.
Hopefully they made it. I haven't heard that anybody...
Yes, I never saw them again.
Yeah. Never heard that they were still out there, huh?
Keep on building Fords, so...
Right.
Yeah.
So your last race that you raced was in 2002 in I guess it was a 1600 Baja Bug. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And
probably, yes.
And what was, did you know that was going to be your last race?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
I'm getting pretty old. And my husband wasn't able to get down and help things much. So, and also the racing was a little bit different, not quite as different people were doing different things. So I still really like it. I still know a lot of the racers. I'm still happy to talk to them, but I don't really. I was running out of money. As you start retiring and all that, you begin to count the dollars pretty carefully.
Right. So, I realize that myself. I turned 65 here in just 2 weeks, and we've been this last year and a half really been concentrating on not spending money on things that I would normally spend money on. Exactly.
That's the same sort of thing that I was running into, and you get all kinds of stuff like that come up that you got to make sure you can do it. So I would enjoy being able to go down and go to the races, and I did do that once in a while. But I don't have a car. I can't drive. My eyes are bad, so I can't even drive myself down to see them. So my husband died, so I have nobody to say, let's go to the race.
Well, maybe after this podcast gets released, somebody will give you a call and say, hey, let's go down to Baja.
Okay.
Judy, I took you to Barstow.
Oh, yeah, she took me to Barstow.
Oh, great. Excellent.
We went to Barstow a couple years ago. She got out there with the checkered flag.
Yep.
Darn near got a rock in her eyes. She stood so close to the racetrack. Then at the end of the races, they didn't know why this crazy old lady was running up to the car. I'm like, that's Judy Smith. She's famous. She's a racer. Sticking her head in the Baja Bugs, and there people are looking at her like, who the heck are you, lady? We had a front row seat thanks to more racing.
Yeah, we did.
That's fun. Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was fun. But I haven't been, I can't drive. I can't drive on the street or something, so I don't have a car. So I can't just hop in the car and go to a race. I'm stuck.
Well, hopefully somebody will drag you out with them, and even if you don't want to go, hopefully you go.
Oh, I would go. If somebody showed up and said, "Hey, there's a pretty good race at such and such a point," I would go. It's just a matter of figuring out how to get to somebody that has a vehicle and all of that kind of stuff.
Right.
And then in the meantime, Rich, we put her in Tony Vanilla's car. And she was one of the entrants in the Hesperia Day parades in September.
Yeah, that was fun.
Excellent.
She got a lot of cheers. People on the sideline recognized her.
Excellent. I'm glad Tony did that. That's great.
Yeah,
it was very cool.
Yep. Yeah, it was. I like that.
So you got inducted in 2008 into Ormhoff, the Off-Road Motorsports Hall of Fame.
Uh-huh.
What was What was your impression? How did you feel when that happened?
I was excited, and I was very pleased because I knew who some of the others were, and I thought it was nice to be put on the same level as like Bud Eakins and people like that. It was kind of weird because then later on I worked for them, and I was on the committee that put other people onto the Off-Road Hall of Fame thing. I thought it was kind of nice. I'm glad that are they still doing it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we every year they still have the induction ceremony down in Vegas, and the last year I think there was 7 that got inducted.
Yeah.
This last
Anybody
time.
for any old people, or are they all new people?
No, they're trying to. I think the hall is trying to make sure that people get recognized while they're still able to enjoy the notoriety and to be able to take that honor personally. So
I think, excuse me, I think that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it. I thought it was wonderful, a nice award, a nice thing, and I'm really pleased. I'm sure they must. I wonder how many people collect trophies and stuff like that. They probably do that too.
Right. With Ormhoff, one of the things that is going on right now is everybody is trying to get as much of the history put together as possible to make sure that it's secure and accurate. Having every single one of the Dusty Times, at least one issue, and they're being recorded and digitized so that they'll be not just in paper form, but in electronic form for forever.
That's good. Do they do the losers as well as the regular race reports?
Absolutely. They do. The whole magazine is being digitized, good. So people can go back and read each one of the magazines on their computer.
Yeah, I used to think that we needed the losers because they had a lot to do with who the winners were, actually, and I always think that their stories were more interesting than the ones who actually won. So of course, Jean, but she let me write anything I wanted to write, so that worked out very well. But that's good because maybe people will remember, because there's some really amazing stories about guys that had all kinds of problems when they were racing off-road.
And those are the greatest stories.
Yeah, I thought so. But it's okay. I like writing about a race and the people that won it and all of that. But I thought the ones that screwed up and didn't get there had the better stories.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's always about the challenge and overcoming those challenges. I think
right, and I think part of the reason that I knew about that was because I was racing, and so I knew what kind of stupid things that I would do and how I would get into trouble. I knew all these other guys were doing the same kinds of things, They were turning left when they should have turned right. They were, all kinds of dumb things. And nobody wrote about that. They always so-and-so finished first, Yeah. And I just thought you needed to get to the ones that screwed up. A lot of people enjoyed reading it, I think.
Absolutely. I agree 100%.
Yeah. Yeah. It was fun. Writing about them was fun because I got to call them and talk to them and interview them and find out what kind of terrible things happened. That was kind of neat. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here.
Oh.
I just wanted to make sure I didn't step on what you were saying.
No, it's okay.
Is there any story that stands out in your mind from any of the racing or the interviews that you did that really tugs at your heart all the time? Or not all the time, but it's one of those things that just keeps flashing back?
No, I don't think so. I think different things hit at different points in time. Where, like, if I'm out in the desert and I see something in the desert that looks like something I've seen, or because it wasn't like you were on a race course and going around and around and around, where you would see the same point time after time after time. There were new things coming up all along. And I had a hard time when I was driving, because I was saying, oh, I got to remember this to put it in the story, but you're not writing it down while you're driving, you know. And it's really hard, but there's just so many things that I can't think of any one thing. Once in a while, if I'm talking to somebody, like talking to you, somebody will say something that'll make me think of one thing that was kind of funny, but it's only one thing, and there's hundreds of them.
So we just got to find the right triggers for you.
It's a little bit like getting somebody's life story, that they don't know where to start and where to finish, you know.
Right.
Yeah, it was just so much fun. I just really enjoyed it. I don't think I ever got to the point where I said, why in the hell am I doing this? A couple times I said, wonder why I started this. I can remember going down a big hill, and I didn't like big hills much, and thinking, well, if I really knew about this, would I have started this kind of thing? But I would have. I enjoyed the being by myself and having to figure it out by myself. I thought that part of it was part of the deal.
I think you're correct. I think that that is a great motivation as well.
Yeah, definitely. Then it's probably something we ought to send teenagers out to do if they wouldn't kill themselves trying to learn it.
We got to get them to quit eating Tide Pods and doing some of the dumb things that they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, Judy, I'd like to say thank you very much for spending some time and talking to me. It was wonderful, and I'm going to see about if I can come visit at some point. I would really love a chance to sit and talk in person, and just a relaxing talk and see what other kind of stories that.
Sure, it'd be wonderful to have a chance to chat some more.
Excellent. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Okay,
Thanks for calling.
Yep, and have a great day.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. All righty, bye-bye. Well, that's another episode of Conversations with Big Rich. I'd like to thank you all for listening. If you could do us a favor and leave us a review on any podcast service that you happen to be listening on, or send us an email or a text message or a Facebook message, and let me know any ideas that you have, or if there's anybody that you have that you think would be a great guest, please forward the contact information to me so that we can try to get them on. And always remember, live life to the fullest. Enjoying life is a must. Follow your dreams and live life with all the gusto you can. Thank you.